For nearly a decade, the Galaxy Note was the undisputed king of Android phones. But when Samsung retired the OG phablet line in 2020, that title passed on to the Ultra. However, while the hardware inside the most expensive Galaxy S model is as dominant as ever, over the past few years, the software in Google phones has begun to outshine anything available from the Korean tech giant. But armed with a new suite of AI-powered features, the Galaxy S24 Ultra got exactly what it needed to maintain its spot atop the Android battlefield. Now for 2024, there are three main areas of improvement for the S24 Ultra: design, cameras, and then all of Samsung's new AI tools. So let's start with its build. The biggest change is the switch to a new titanium frame, which, yes, is similar to what Apple did for the iPhone 15 Pro last fall. So if you're the kind of person who likes keeping score of who's copying whom, go ahead and chalk up a point for Tim Cook's team. That said, because the previous Ultra had an aluminum chassis instead of stainless steel like on the iPhone, we're not actually seeing a huge difference in weight. In fact, we're talking a minuscule 2-gram decrease from 234 grams on the S23 Ultra to 232 grams on the S24 Ultra. It's a bit tougher, but not really any lighter. There's also a subtle change in texture from the polished sides on the previous model to a new matte finish. Now, as someone who doesn't love a super reflective design, I appreciate this new detail, but I know this is kind of a personal preference thing. Some other changes are bezels that are 42% thinner than before, which I know is a bit hard to imagine because it's not like the S23 Ultra had huge black borders. But if we put both models side by side, there is a noticeable difference, especially along the top and bottom. Lastly, unlike its more affordable siblings, the S24 Ultra has Gorilla Armor panels instead of Gorilla Glass Victus 2. In back, there's a similar matte look, which actually carries around a bit to the front, because Corning claims its latest formula offers improved anti-reflective properties. Now, the effect is difficult to show off on camera, but it's kind of like going from the Steam Deck's normal display to Valve's optional anti-glare screen. The big difference is that there isn't nearly as much of an impact on color saturation, so you still get a very punchy display. Now, speaking of displays, I've been using the Pixel 8 Pro since the fall, as it was the last major phone release of 2023, and that thing has a very nice panel. But after switching over to the S24U, well, there's just no contest. Samsung's 6.8-inch 120Hz screen is sharp, vibrant, and managed to make everything just pop a bit more. And now it's even brighter, peaking at an eye-watering 2600 nits. Plus, when you're outdoors, thanks to an improved vision booster, you get an extra 300 nits of perceived brightness. So videos, games, whatever look great no matter where you are. Next, let's talk cameras. Similar to the previous model, the S24 Ultra features a 4-camera setup plus a laser autofocus module. There's a 200-megapixel main sensor, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 10-megapixel telephoto with a 3x optical zoom. So pretty much same as before for those 3 lenses. The change for this year is that instead of a 10x zoom for its longer telephoto camera, Samsung went with a 5x optical lens made it to a higher res 50-megapixel sensor. The company claims this change was made based on customer feedback and usage patterns, in which the 5x was the most popular focal length. So on the S24U, its longest lens was optimized for that behavior, which makes a lot of sense. In most cases, this change is for the best, with the S24 Ultra capturing detailed images at 5x that are just as good as what you get from the Pixel 8 Pro. In a shot of the Statue of Liberty from way across the water, aside from some small differences in white balance, both phones produced relatively sharp pics. That said, if you really like shooting long-distance photos, the S23 Ultra's true 10x optical zoom still delivers the best results. Now, I should mention that in some of its materials, Samsung says the S24U has a quad telephoto camera system with up to a 10x optical quality zoom. But depending on how you're counting, that's not entirely accurate. In the camera app, you see shortcuts for 2x, 3x, 5x, and 10x, pretty straightforward. However, the 2x is actually a crop down from using the phone's 200-megapixel main camera, while the 10x is a crop in from the 5x lens. In both situations, the Ultra is using pixel binning and some AI help to improve overall image quality, and the results are solid, but it's still not exactly a true 4-lens telephoto system. And generally, the S24 Ultra produced more than satisfactory pics. You get Samsung's typical saturated colors and slightly warmer tones, which makes images look rich and lively, which is always nice. Though, if you look for it, you'll also notice the company's penchant for sometimes going a bit overboard on sharpening. But even in low light, the S24U's night mode was pretty competitive with Google's night sight, which is definitely a feat. Okay, now I mentioned AI briefly before, but now it's time to get into Samsung's Galaxy AI features for real. There's an entire suite of tools, often denoted by a little icon with 3 stars, that you'll see in various menus across the phone. And these AI features can largely be sorted into about 3 categories: text and translation, photography and editing, and search. There's an interpreter mode for in-person conversations, along with a live translate feature that you can use during calls. Let's give our friend Sherlyn a call and test that out right now. Okay, so how are you doing?
It's a little strange that I'm listening to you right now. I'm the host.
I'm not sure that was entirely accurate. Tell me what you think, how the performance of the translation is going.
Most translations are quite accurate, but some of the words they choose are a little strange, and I will wait a long time to hear what you say.
For someone who is not fluent in Chinese but can pick up, pieces, I do notice that some of the word choices are a little strange, and like you said, there is a bit of a wait time between going back and forth between people.
I'm telling you, if I'm really using this, I don't have the patience to wait for you to finish, and then I'll wait for the translation.
2 hours later.
I'm slightly disappointed that doesn't seem like there's a traditional option for the Mandarin, which, is a little sad for me. I don't know where I got ISIS from.
I'll see you again.
Bye, Lynn. Both are relatively accurate and more than good enough to use in a pinch while traveling. However, translations aren't perfect and the user experience can be a little clunky, especially if you're on the phone and you have to wait around so the AI can catch up to the convo. Then you have Chat Assist, which can check your spelling and grammar and adjust your tone in messages. Granted, some options like the one for social and Emojify are a bit gimmicky, but on the other hand, I genuinely appreciate the polite and professional choices, as that can help prevent a text or email from sounding overly angry or combative. You just have to remember to use them, which might be difficult because you might forget they're there, and I'm sure that not everyone is going to want to let their phone's AI edit their messages. In the Notes app, the S24U can summarize, auto-format, spell check, or translate a file, which is nice, but not exactly groundbreaking, as a lot of these features are already available from other services like ChatGPT or Bard. That said, these improvements to note-taking are also the biggest upgrades to the S24 Ultra's S Pen, as the design and functionality of Samsung stylus are pretty much unchanged from previous models. But perhaps my favorite of Samsung's text-based tools is the transcription feature in the voice recorder app. So here we are, and I've opened up the voice recorder app on the S24 Ultra, and then I've also pulled over a Pixel 8 Pro to kind of show the differences between how Samsung's AI handles transcribing versus Google. We'll start record on both. And the big difference is that if I want to see the transcription in real time on the Pixel, all I have to do is hit the button over here. However, on the Samsung, I'm recording, but I can't see the transcription in real time. So if I want to see the transcription at all, I have to hit stop, I have to save it, and then I have to go over to the transcription and then hit the transcribe button manually. It still works, and the transcription is generally good enough for work. It's not perfect, but you can fix any, small flubs or whatever. But it does take a little bit of effort because it takes 1, 2, 3, or 4 more taps to get to the same point. Whereas, hey, the Pixel's already recording in real time and I can see it, and all I have to do is hit save. And if I want to export the transcription, then there's a separate button for that. Meanwhile, when it comes to photos, you have AI-suggested edits that can automatically remaster images or provide prompts to remove distracting elements like shadows and reflections. You can see these options just by hitting the info icon in the gallery app, which makes them super easy to use and might end up being the fastest way to improve your photos. No need to edit things manually. Here's a shot I took last year. I was at Hudson Yards and I thought, hey, that's a pretty cool shot. So you can see all the way down 30 stories, but the reflection kind of ruins the whole effect. But if I hit the info icon, and here you go, I get a suggested edit for erase reflections. And then look, right away, it just got rid of that reflection. It's not perfect, but hey, it looks way better than it did before. But if you prefer to be a bit more hands-on, there are generative AI edits that allow you to reframe shots, move subjects around, or delete them entirely while the phone fills in the blanks. It's a surprisingly effective tool that sidesteps the need for Photoshop in a lot of cases. But once again, if you look real close, you'll notice details that show how Samsung's AI isn't quite as slick as something like the Pixel 8's Magic Editor. You'll notice the hand is gone, but suddenly the tail of Starscream right here is a lot longer than it really should be. And that's kind of, one of the challenges of like, hey, her hand is covering up the end of the jet, so what is it going to replace it with? And in this case, it kind of invented all new fins for Starscream. That said, it is better than a hand in the photo, and so now we have Optimus fighting Starscream, and hey, this is kind of cool. And this is actually a trend that I noticed across a lot of Samsung's AI features. They work, but things just aren't quite as streamlined or polished as a lot of Google's alternatives. In the Notes app, there's a word limit for auto formatting, summarizing, and more, which limits you to about 3 or 4 paragraphs at a time. So even if you have a medium-sized doc, you're gonna have to tackle it in chunks. Meanwhile, for photos, sometimes if you try to highlight areas to remove reflections, the phone will just kind of paint over that whole area, and then you kind of lose the effect. In other situations, the AI will suggest edits that just don't make any sense, like trying to turn a short motion photo into a time-lapse. Now in that situation, that may have been caused by me importing a photo taken by a different phone, but still, I feel like the AI should know better. Even moving subjects around in a pic can get a bit wonky depending on the shot and what you're trying to do. And every now and then, you'll pull up an image and hit the remaster button only for the phone to tell you that there's nothing to fix. Which, it feels kind of good as a photographer, but at the same time, why am I being told that there are things to improve? Now, some of this is simply a learning process. It's gonna take a bit of time for people to get better at utilizing these kinds of tools. But at the same time, this is Samsung's first big push into AI-assisted features, so it probably shouldn't be a shock to see a handful of hiccups. And rounding out the S24 Ultra's kit is Circle to Search, which is the one AI feature that relies on help from the cloud instead of taking place on device. It's basically a combination of traditional text-based queries and visual search tools like Google Lens, but without the need for a standalone app. The neat thing is that it can analyze images from the web or objects and photos you've taken yourself, which makes it pretty versatile. But Google recently announced that Circle to Search is coming to Pixel phones too, so it's not like this is an exclusive feather in Samsung's cap. Finally, powering the phone is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip. For Galaxy, because we can't ignore Samsung's special branding, and it offers blazing performance. In Geekbench 6, the S24 Ultra posted multi-core scores that were 30 to 35% higher than what we saw from devices with Qualcomm's previous flagship chip. Meanwhile, thanks to a vapor chamber that's almost twice as large as before, the phone never got above lukewarm even while gaming. Another bonus is that the S24U now comes with 12 gigs of RAM across every config, unlike the base S23 Ultra that got saddled with just 8 gigs of RAM and then you had to upgrade to get 12. And then between its 5,000 mAh battery and additional power efficiency gains thanks to its new silicon, the S24 Ultra has truly excellent battery life. On our local video rundown test, it lasted 24 hours and 19 minutes, which is up more than 4 hours from the previous model. But even more impressive is its real-world performance. I often found myself with 50% battery left after 24 hours, so depending on your usage, I could easily see this thing lasting 2 days without needing a charge. At this point, you might be fed up with companies trying to shoehorn AI into pretty much everything. But if you think about these tools simply as software upgrades meant to make your phone a lot more useful, Samsung's big push into machine learning makes a lot more sense. Samsung also tweaked its main telephoto lens to be more useful in a wider range of situations without a major decrease in quality. But the big thing is that with its Galaxy AI suite, Samsung finally has an answer to a lot of the sophisticated features that were previously only available from the Pixel family. Sure, the S24 tools aren't quite as polished as Google's offerings, but they'll get you 80 to 90% of the way there. While you might not use them every day, if you take a little time to play around with them, they may end up coming in handy in the right situation. And as a complement to what is essentially a top to bottom list of best-in-class smartphone hardware, it feels like Samsung is using AI to shore up one of the few remaining weaknesses of its flagship handset. Especially now that the company is increasing support to include 7 years of OS and security updates, which you'll love to see. That said, the Ultra's biggest sticking point, its price, is still an issue. And with the S24U starting at $1,300, it's now $100 more expensive than the outgoing model. I'm also kind of disappointed with Samsung for not adopting Qi 2. Even if this phone falls under the second half of Samsung's 2-year design cycle, what's the point of having all the big OEMs, including Apple, agree on a useful wireless charging standard, only to have Samsung, one of the biggest phone makers in the world, drag its feet when it comes to implementation? Qi 2 got approved last year, and at this point, it may not be until 2025 that we see it on a high-end Samsung handset. Man. Anyways, while harnessing AI might not be a super fun or exciting development now that everyone and their grandmother is basically toying with adding baby Skynets into, well, everything, it does make the S24 Ultra a more powerful and well-rounded phone. And when you tack all this onto something that already had a really significant lead in hardware, you end up with a pretty commanding device. But tell me what you think. Do you think Samsung is smart to push into AI, or would you rather concentrate on hardware like on previous generations? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always, don't forget to subscribe to Engadget for more news, reviews, and hands-ons.